Let's talk about this game update because there's a brand new patch out for Rematch, specifically update 1.203.02, and honestly, there's quite a bit to unpack here. If on the surface, it might look like a small bug fix patch. What I want to do is walk you through not just what the developers changed in this latest update, but also what it means for players right now, how it connects to the earlier patches, and even where things might be headed in the near future. So, if you've been keeping up with Rematch and you've seen that big crossplay patch that dropped recently, this one is basically the follow-up that smooths out some of the rough edges. And you know how it usually goes. The big flashy update comes first, everyone gets excited, but then those smaller follow-up patches are the ones that actually make the game stable and enjoyable long-term. So let's start with what's actually in this 1.200.302 update. The patch notes are short, but very important. The first major fix is for the mouse and keyboard preset issue. For a while, players on PC were running into weird situations where their custom presets or even the default controls just wouldn't behave properly. Some people had controls reverting back to something random mid-match, others had missing inputs, and overall it was one of those problems that didn't just feel like a small inconvenience, it could actually ruin the flow of a game. If you're someone who prefers mouse and keyboard over controller, this bug probably had you pulling your hair out. With this patch, those presets are now working as intended. And while it might sound like a small line in the notes, the reality is that fixing controls is always a massive quality of life improvement because nothing feels worse than losing a match, not because of your skill, but because the game didn't register what you wanted it to do. The second major thing fixed here has to do with the final Battle Pass tiers not unlocking properly. Imagine grinding through all those matches, putting in hours to get to the end, and then realizing the last few tiers just wouldn't budge, no matter how much XP you earned. That's exactly what players were dealing with, and understandably, it was super frustrating. A battle pass is meant to feel like a reward system, not a punishment. And when the finish line is broken, it kills a lot of motivation. With this new patch, the developers made sure that anyone progressing through the battle pass can actually claim those rewards without getting stuck. It's not just about cosmetics or bragging rights, it's about the sense of accomplishment you get when you complete a season's worth of content. So fixing that bug restores that sense of satisfaction. Now, what's interesting here is how this patch fits into the larger picture of recent Rematch updates. Just before this one, we had patch 3, which was labeled 1.200.301, and that's the one that introduced Crossplay. Crossplay is a huge deal because it basically unifies the community. Instead of being locked to just your platform, whether that's PS5, Xbox, or PC, you can now match up with players across the board. That update also made some tweaks to gameplay mechanics like volleys and cleaned up a few other issues. But it also introduced new problems, like the ones that just got fixed in this patch. So you can think of 1.200.302 as the cleanup crew arriving after the big party. Crossplay brought the excitement, but it also left a mess. And now we're seeing the developers come in with the broom and dustpan to tidy things up. One thing I really respect about the way they're handling this is that they're communicating clearly about what's fixed and what's still on the to-do list. They've already said there's another update in the works, which will be version 1.200.400, and that one is supposed to tackle more of the known issues that are still lingering. So even if you run into a bug right now that wasn't mentioned in this patch, there's a good chance it's on the radar for the next round of fixes. That kind of transparency is important because players want to know that their feedback is being heard. Nobody expects a game of this size to be flawless, but people do expect problems to be acknowledged and addressed in a reasonable time frame. And I think that's where Rematch is kind of finding its rhythm right now. We've all seen games that launch updates and then go silent, leaving the community guessing about what's next. That silence is the worst thing because it creates frustration and speculation, and eventually people just leave for another game. Here, the devs are moving pretty quickly. Crossplay came in patch 3, this bug fix patch followed almost immediately, and they're already pointing toward the next one. That momentum matters because it tells players that this is a living, breathing game that's actively supported. Let's take a step back though and think about what these specific fixes mean for different types of players. If you're a competitive player who thrives on precision and relies on fast reactions, having your controls function properly is absolutely critical. Imagine being in a clutch moment, one-on-one, and the input for a quick action just doesn't register because the preset bugged out. That's not just annoying, it could be the difference between winning and losing. By fixing this, they're making sure that skill is the deciding factor, not technical glitches. And if you're more of a casual player who's in it for progression and rewards, the Battle Pass fix is equally important. It's about trust in the game's systems. You want to feel like when you put in effort, you'll actually get rewarded. No one wants to grind for hours and then find out the final stretch is broken. Another point worth talking about is how these kinds of updates impact the community as a whole. When issues linger too long, players start to fragment. Some switch platforms, some stop playing, some flood forums and social media with complaints. But when developers move quickly to address problems, it keeps the community together. And with crossplay now active, keeping the community unified is more important than ever. The whole point of crossplay is to make matchmaking faster and more diverse. But if a portion of players gets frustrated and leaves, that benefit is reduced. By fixing things fast, they're preserving the integrity of that new feature. It's also worth noting that these smaller updates tend to go unnoticed by people who only skim the surface. But for the dedicated players, they're often more meaningful than the flashy headline updates. Sure, crossplay made the news, but if you ask someone who's been grinding daily, they'll tell you that being able to actually use their controls properly or finish their battle pass is way more impactful to their personal experience. It's like the difference between buying a new car and getting the brakes fixed. Both matter, but only one directly affects your ability to drive safely every single day. Now, let's talk a little about what might be coming in that 1.200.400 patch, because that's where things start to get exciting again. While this update fixed the two main issues, there are still reports of other bugs floating around. Some players have mentioned matchmaking hiccups even with crossplay. Others have pointed out minor glitches in animations or gameplay mechanics. And of course, there's always balancing concerns. While we don't have the exact notes for 1.200.400 yet, the expectation is that it'll take a broader approach and squash some of those issues. And given how fast they followed up on this last patch, it's safe to assume we won't be waiting too long. One more thing I want to point out is how patches like this affect the reputation of a game in the long term. Every multiplayer game has bugs, especially when you're rolling out something as complex as crossplay. But what separates the games that survive from the ones that fade is how quickly and effectively developers respond. Rematch is starting to build a track record here. Each patch is like a statement of intent. It tells us they're invested, they're paying attention, and they're not leaving players to struggle on their own. That kind of reputation builds loyalty, and loyalty is what keeps a player base healthy even when the hype of launch wears off. So to sum up, even though 1.200.302 looks small on paper, it's actually a pretty big deal in practice. Controls are fixed, progression is fixed, the game is more stable, and players can trust that their time isn't being wasted. It sets up a smoother foundation for crossplay, which was the big feature from the last update, and it opens the door for the next round of improvements. And really, that's what you want in an evolving online game. You want to feel like each patch is moving things forward, even if it's just a step at a time. And before I wrap this up, I want to say something directly to the players who might feel like these fixes are too small or not exciting enough. Think about it this way. Every time you log in and something that used to frustrate you no longer happens, that's progress. You might not notice it as much as a new map or a new mode, but subconsciously your experience is smoother, your matches are less stressful, and your overall enjoyment goes up. That's the quiet power of patches like this, and it's why they matter just as much as the big flashy ones.